Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our cyber liability webinar. It is timely right now because we are just seeing an increase in the number of attacks, and also too from our firm, the number of claims that we are having to submit in due to these attacks. We have one of our strategic partners here, Bo from Evolve. Evolve is one of the best out there in regards to cyber. We just thought it would be great if Bo could come in and really give us a high-level overview of really what's happening right now. It's kind of unfortunate. We're dealing with COVID. We're dealing with sick employees. We're dealing with furloughs and layoffs, and then having to worry about not only that, but infrastructure attacks as well too. So it's kind of one of those things. It's when it rains, it pours. But we thought it would be timely for us to give you some best of breed solutions, understand kind of what the landscape is right now as well, and give you some ideas on how to protect your company during this difficult time. So I wanted to welcome Bo Kelly to the stage. We're going to be kind of doing this almost as like a panel presentation. If you guys do have questions, please put them in the chat box over there. We do have slide 44 for questions, so we will not be ignoring you. We do have a specific section, but hopefully we'll be going over all the main topics and main concerns that you have. And if we don't, please let us know as well too. So welcome, Bo.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you guys for having me today. And for all the attendees, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you learn a thing or two about cyber. So just to give you a little background on myself, I've been in the cyber insurance market for about 4.5 years now. I spent 2 of those years working in London for a Lloyd's of London wholesaler. And for those of you who don't know, London is kind of the birthplace of insurance. So I got a really good foundation, understanding the different exposures and coverages that businesses face. So now I moved back in 2018, and I've been essentially just specializing in cyber for this entire time. So before we get started, I want to give you guys a quick intro on Evolve. So Evolve is a cybersecurity insurance specialist market, and we are unique because literally all we do is provide businesses with a high quality and comprehensive cyber insurance program. So we work with brokers like Tony and Brad here at S&K to help educate businesses about all of the different exposures and claims that we see on a regular basis. So by specializing in solely cyber, we are able to really drill down on where we're seeing the claims, and we use that data to enhance our program in 3 specific areas. The first is going to be coverage. So at Evolve, we offer some of the broadest coverage currently available in the marketplace, which as a policyholder gives you the peace of mind that when the worst happens, you are going to have coverage to protect you. The second is risk management services or pre-breach tools. So we offer 5 free services that come with the purchase of a policy, and they're essentially tools to help the business owner better understand their exposure and reduce their actual risk. And the third, and frankly, which I think is the most important, is we have a really experienced cyber claims handling team. Now, this is one of the most important things to consider when purchasing a cyber policy, because besides the promise to pay claims, we offer a service to assist you when things go wrong. So Evolve is unique because we have one of the largest cyber specialist claims teams in the world, made up of 90 in-house forensics professionals and data breach attorneys. So just to give you guys a little bit more color, the reason why we've been able to be so progressive when it comes to claims is because we've probably handled the most cyber claims in terms of volume than any of our competitors. So we see around 1 to 3 claims per day, averaging around 125 per month. Now, our claims team has been handling cyber claims for over 20 years, and we have around 50,000 businesses on our books. So it has allowed us to really help make cyber just help streamline cyber for our clients, which has allowed us to just make things a lot easier for everyone to understand.
Bo, I had a question for you. I know that we see a lot of the larger entities, larger companies suffering from data breaches. I know I get an email every other day as far as, your data has been compromised. Unfortunately, it's in our
Right.
data. A lot of the people that are on our webinar today are somewhat considered mid to small businesses. I mean, how prone are they to hacks and attacks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to show you guys, I'm just going to jump a few slides here, but the Internet Crime Report is released every single year, and it's essentially the FBI aggregates all of this data. And what a lot of people don't realize is small to medium enterprise businesses, they almost never make the headlines in terms of a breach because they're just not reported. And what's interesting is around 62% of the cyber attacks that we see
Mhm.
happen to small to mid-sized businesses.
Wow.
And why is that, you might ask? Well, smaller businesses are gonna be much easier targets for cyber criminals to essentially breach into. They're gonna have weaker security configurations, less employee-based training, and when a smaller business gets hit with a cyber attack, the FBI just simply doesn't have the manpower to investigate all of them.
Got
So
it.
what you see on your screen is just some statistics from year after year. And so in 2019, the FBI received over 450,000 complaints of cyber attacks. That's nearly 1,200 a day. So if you're a mom and pop shop on Main Street and you get hit with a small cyber attack that is maybe
Mhm.
$15,000 to $20,000, that's going to be really detrimental to the business, but the FBI has bigger fish to fry. So they're not going to necessarily be able to investigate all of these smaller attacks.
Got it.
Another, just on your screen, you can see the dollar value of how much money is being stolen year after year. Cyber claims are ticking up and up, and they're becoming more severe and more frequent as this is, I mean, the easiest way for criminals to make a quick buck. We are in
Right.
a digital era, and a lot of bad actors are really able to do a lot of damage from behind a computer in the comfort of their own living room. These criminals are getting
Right.
so sophisticated that it's getting harder and harder for victims to spot red flags and tell what's real and what's fake. Another interesting statistic is that California, we are the #1 targeted state. We are
We're
also
number
one of the
one,
largest economies.
huh? Okay.
Yeah, so just operating in California, you're gonna have a larger target on your back
Okay.
because, I mean, there's a lot of money coming in and out of California.
Mhm.
And as you can see, in 2019, hackers were able to steal over $470 million from businesses and individuals in California.
Wow.
So
Okay.
great question, Tony. Did that help answer?
It did. It did. Absolutely. And I would probably say too, I probably get 3 questionable emails a day now where I'm
Right,
literally triple checking to see various things that you're going to go over, but
right,
invoice, commission statements, we want to send you money. And I'm like, wow. And so I've seen it almost double, and now I'm almost seeing it on a daily basis as
right,
well too. So when
right,
you talk about education, I think that's critical.
right. So I kind of wanted to take another step back here and just kind of give you guys an overview on what is cyber insurance. So for those of you who don't know, cyber insurance can help protect a business against the financial loss resulting from a large range of cyber threats, including cyber crime, data breaches, and system interruption. Now, in today's world, the hackers are consistently evolving and they're thinking up new creative methods to illegally acquire company funds and sensitive data. So cyber is, what's interesting, if you look at any cyber policy from any insurance carrier in the marketplace, it's always going to be split up between 2 coverage sections. So you're going to have your
Right.
first party coverages and your third party coverages. So third party coverages are intended to protect the business if they are sued for passing along a virus or losing people's information. So third-party coverages will cover the defense costs and settlements and any potential fines or penalties that arise from that lawsuit. Now, where we see most of our claims, as you can see on the graph, is going to be within the first-party coverage section. So first-party coverages is built to cover all of the costs that come directly out of the business's pocket when they experience a cyber attack. So it may be engaging a forensics investigator, or paying the hourly billables for an attorney, or the cost to notify, or maybe the lost profit because your systems are offline.
Right.
Or maybe you sent a fraudulent transfer. So all of these things are going to negatively affect the business itself. And what's interesting is that is where we see 96% of the claims that we're paying out. So as a purchaser of a cyber policy, you always want to look for a policy that essentially has the broadest first party coverage, because that's typically where you are going to see the claims.
Perfect.
So many business owners always ask, well, what cyber exposure do I actually face? There's kind of this common misconception where most people think cyber is only for businesses that have a lot of sensitive records to rectify a data breach. And so many people don't understand the exposure that they face on a day-to-day business. Now, in the cyber world, there's really 4 key areas that you can look at to assess your cyber exposure. The first is obviously if you collect sensitive data, but even if you don't store a lot of consumer records or credit card information, you're still going to likely have a lot of important information that you need to access on a regular basis. I'm talking about business critical data. So things like appointment bookings or delivery schedules or any intellectual property. So if you're a nonprofit, maybe it's your donor information or a wholesaler's inventory levels. If this business critical data becomes unavailable, it can seriously have a negative impact on the business's ability to operate. Now, another area is, do you rely on technology? We're in the 21st century. Every single business out there is utilizing a computer
Right.
to effectively run their day-to-day operations. Think of a doctor's office. All of their scheduling, patient files, patient correspondence, it's all stored on a computer, in a server, in the cloud, out of sight, out of mind. But what happens if those files become corrupted, encrypted, or deleted? How would that medical office be able to operate without access to all of those files?
Right.
The next point is every single business performs financial transactions. Everyone's going to have clients, vendors, suppliers that they are consistently going to be sending money and receiving money from. Now, hackers are consistently looking to intercept these payments, meaning that any business that sends and receives money is going to have an exposure. And finally, technology is never 100% effective. Many people think that just because I invest in antivirus or firewall or any other technological defenses, that they have
Right.
no cyber exposure. What's interesting is more than 90% of the attacks that occurred in the last year relied on human error to gain access. So in today's world, instead of the hackers attacking systems and infrastructure, threat actors are focusing on targeting people, their roles, the data which they have access to, and the likelihood that they're going to click here. So cyber criminals are consistently finding human beings to be the most effective vectors to infiltrate organizations.
I like it. So Bo, I mean, a lot of my clients right now use, an outsourced IT vendor, or they have IT security right now, right?
Right.
Like you mentioned, but do they still have cyber exposure?
Absolutely. So even if they, like I said, if they invest in IT security, threats are they are continually evolving to bypass the latest security measures. I'll touch on this a little bit later on, but there's also a lot of software out there that is sold on the dark web to help hackers infiltrate organizations. They're consistently looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. And again, people are the weakest link. And so how are you going to be able to monitor what all of your employees are clicking on in a day-to-day? And even if you outsource all of your IT, we still think you're going to have an exposure, because what happens if that third party has a breach and you then can't access all of your information. And if that third party loses any of your client's sensitive information, well, you are
Mhm.
still that data owner. So you are still going to have the responsibility to notify, and you might get hit with a regulatory claim.
Wow.
Um, and so that's the nice thing about a lot of these cyber policies today, especially in the business interruption section, is if you do utilize, say, a third party cloud provider and they go down, there's actually a dependent business interruption section built into our policy. So we will actually reimburse you for the lost profits for that third party going down.
Got it. Thank you.
Now, what I want you guys to take away from today is there's really two cyber attacks that we are seeing on a day-to-day basis. Cyber you don't need to have a great understanding. Just if you can understand these two attacks, these are probably where the business or a business is going to get hit. So the first is ransomware. That is our most frequent claim. And just to give you guys a little bit more color on our statistics, our claim stats, around 32% of our claims in 2019 were ransomware attacks.
Mm.
And another 30% were funds transfer fraud. So you guys are going to hear me say funds transfer fraud or social engineering or wire transfer fraud. It's essentially it's synonymous with invoice manipulation and a hacker trying to trick an employee to paying a fraudulent invoice. Now, so with ransomware, the most common exposure here is having an email address. Every single employee is going to have an email account if they are contacting other employees or clients. So no matter the industry, every business is going to be utilizing emails to engage with their customers, their clients. So if an employee clicks on a malicious link, it could cause a serious financial harm for that business. And two, every single company, like I said, is going to have a bank account. So businesses are going to be vulnerable to wire transfer fraud and social engineering types of attacks because everyone is sending payments electronically. So the takeaway here is over 60% of our claims are these two attacks.
Got it.
So now I'm going to take a little time to just give you guys a little background on what ransomware is, and then I'm also going to give you guys some more information on the wire transfer fraud claim as well. So I think I'm assuming everyone has heard about ransomware in the news, but just as a refresher, it is a computer virus that locks up any infected files on your computer and encrypts all those files, preventing users from accessing them without a decryption key. And so hackers will essentially request an extortion demand,
Right.
typically to be paid in a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, to gain access to these decryption keys. And the hackers will essentially typically give the business 48 hours to pay that ransom. Otherwise, they will delete the data. Now, the most common ways that hackers are installing ransomware on our clients' computer systems is via phishing links and vulnerable software. So the most common is phishing links. It's probably around 70% of our ransomware claims are because an employee clicked on a malicious link that they were not supposed to, and it essentially downloaded the virus on the computer system. Now, what's interesting is these hackers are not necessarily, they're not criminal masterminds. All they have to do is they need to either join a hacking group, or they can either pay a licensing fee to use a specific strand of ransomware, and then they can go on the dark web and they can purchase 10 or 15,000 stolen email addresses and start their phishing campaign, waiting for someone to click on the link.
Wow.
Now, the next way is, like I said, the vulnerable softwares. We're seeing this a lot in municipalities or nonprofits or any government funded agency. Typically, any business that has a lower IT budget, they might not have the means to invest in all the bells and whistles in terms of IT security. So hackers are targeting a lot of these entities that might have outdated systems, because what hackers are able to do is they're able to find security vulnerabilities, and they're actually able to implant a virus without the need of someone actually clicking on something to install it. So now I'm going to kind of give you guys a little background on ransomware as a service, because I don't think many people really realize that this is a thing, but it's actually a pretty and scary, and it's a lucrative and scary business model. So essentially, ransomware as a service, these hackers, these groups of hackers, almost work as a commercial business. And so you're going to have the ransomware developers who are going to create the virus, and then they're going to recruit a bunch of affiliate hackers to then distribute the ransomware. So it's interesting because in certain countries, ransomware development is actually legal, but the distribution is illegal. And then you have countries like Russia, where it's illegal to hack other Russians, but legal to hack other countries. Now, these affiliate hackers are essentially make a commission, so they can make upwards of $100,000 a month with ransomware as a service. Now, these affiliates, they're going to have minimum requirements that are more demanding on how many infections or how much ransom demand is brought in each month. And they can actually get kicked out or replaced if they don't fulfill those requirements. So this is people's full-time jobs. And so when we come into these ransomware claims, our forensics team is always going to try to negotiate with these affiliate hackers, and they essentially act as account managers. And if we request a large discount or a discounted extortion, they have to go and filter that request through the chain to get approved by the developers. So another interesting statistic with ransomware is if you rewind to 2016, over 70% of ransomware attacks were happening on consumer devices. Fast forward to 2019, over 80% of the ransomware attacks were happening on enterprise computers. And that's simply because corporations are going to have much deeper pockets, giving hackers a much quicker payday. Now, it's also important to note that not all ransomware is alike. So knowing the hacking group or the variant of attack is going to inform to us what a successful recovery is going to look like. So this is another key value add into purchasing a cyber policy, because the business owner is going to gain access to a knowledgeable forensics team who knows all the reputations of each hacking group, which will allow us to leverage that to essentially ask for a discounted extortion demand to really help reduce the event costs on the business. Now, it's also important to note that we're seeing newer strands of ransomware that have kind of a data breach component to it. And so there's a hacking group called the Maze Group that frequently uses these types of ransomware attacks, and they essentially steal confidential information, and they will threaten to release that to the public as incentive for the business to pay the ransomware, the ransom demand. And so ransomware traditionally triggers our extortion, forensics, and business interruption sections, but now we're seeing a ton of additional costs with legal fees and potential notification costs to consumers. So here on the screen, I just wanted to give you guys a few examples on what some phishing emails might look like. We're seeing a ton of threats that they're trying to make it look like it's Outlook or 365, but there's a few red flags. Obviously, look for the grammatical errors or potential the domain. Always look for fake domains. We're seeing a lot of hackers. They will use Greek symbols, or they will put an R next to an N to look like an M, or they'll use an I instead of a lowercase L. So they're using all of these tricks to try to lure and take advantage of people, because a lot of these emails look legitimate. Now, here's another one, and again, you can see there's 3 S's in message, and kind of all the links are kind of a red flag. We're also seeing a lot of phishing attempts where hackers, they go onto the company's website, they see who the CEO is, they send an email to an employee posing as a CEO, asking them to verify an attachment really quick. So now, a lot of people don't also realize how commercialized the cybercrime industry's become. So the hackers will essentially utilize the dark web as a marketplace to buy and sell anything that they need to pull off these attacks. So they can buy and sell stolen personal information, emails, credit card details, health records. You can purchase strains of viruses. You can buy, you can basically buy softwares that act as like a CRM software, so like a Salesforce, for hackers to track the success of their phishing campaigns. There are softwares out there that guess generated passwords, or there are key logging softwares that are intended to track the keystrokes. And so hackers have access to a lot of software and viruses at their disposal. So they don't need to actually write the code to create a lot of these viruses themselves. They can just utilize what someone else has already built.
So this is like an Amazon for hackers, and they can pick and
Exactly.
choose. And oh well, I
Exactly.
guess they're entrepreneurial and they have it set up correctly. Wow, this is
I know.
it's quite scary to see the other side of the world and what it would look like as well too, with your information out there. Wow.
Right, right. And for those of you who don't know, the dark web is essentially a part of the internet that isn't visible to search engines, and it requires the use of an anonymizing browser called Tor to be accessed. And so essentially a good chunk of the dark web is devoted to buying and selling all of this information. And so if your information ends up on the dark web, for instance, after a data breach, an identity thief could gain access to it. Or if your email addresses end up on the dark web, you're that much more likely to be targeted of a lot of these phishing types of attacks. So now the question is, why is a cyber policy essential? Well, in a ransomware scenario, ransomware is the type of claim that, based on the severity, it could trigger almost every single section of our policy. So in the least severe ransomware claims, you're always going to have to engage 3 professionals: a forensics investigator. They are the IT specialist who is going to come in, comb through your computer system, figure out what's infected, how to remove the virus, patch the security hole. If the hackers extracted any personal data, you're going to need to engage a data breach attorney, because they're going to help advise you on all of the state, private, and federal regulatory bodies and each state specific notification laws to make sure that you're not hit with a regulatory investigation or a potential fine and penalty. And then you might want to engage a PR firm, because if you do lose your client's information, how are you going to notify them in a way that you can retain them as clients? So all 3 of these professionals charge very high hourly billables, anywhere from $350 to $500 an hour. So the minute you have a claim, that those hourly billables are going to be ticking the minute you pick up the phone. Now, we're also seeing an increased extortion costs. So there are hacking groups like Ryuk, and they have been known to have a $1 million minimum extortion demand. But it's also important to note that a lot of the times, these hackers have access to the business's financials. So remember, they're looking for that quick payday. So they are going to choose a demand that they know might not break the bank, and that they can just move along to the next target then. But then you also have businesses like Garmin, the GPS or fitness watch. 2 weekends ago, they got hit with a ransomware. Their entire systems were down for 3 days, and they got hit with a $10 million ransom demand. So it's really at the discretion of the hackers. Now, where we see ransomware claims really inflate or spiral out of control is if the backups are corrupted, your data is destroyed. That is where we see these claims inflating over the $1 million mark, because now you're really playing with the business's revenue figures. So as a business owner, how much profit would you be losing if your systems are down for 3 days? What about a week? What about a month? What about 2 months? Now, a lot of the times in these really severe scenarios, all the data gets destroyed, and we have to come in and we have to rekey all that information into the client's computer system, calling up all their clients, putting all that back into their network, and then reconfiguring all of their hardware and software as well. That all takes time. And then if you lose clients as a result, that you're going to be, again, losing profits here. So there's a ton of areas that go into these ransomware attacks.
Oh, I have a question for you. You know, we have some clients that have their data on the cloud. So do you
Right.
see that as a higher exposure, lower exposure? And then second question is too, you know, luckily we haven't incurred a ransomware, but do you or does a client need to immediately, because it's usually at 48 hours, contact you guys to then start with the process?
Right. Great questions, Tony. So I'll start with the cloud, and then I'll
Okay.
go on to the notification. It is a really common misconception that just because data is stored in the cloud, that it's secured. So most businesses today will use a cloud service provider to store their data. However, that doesn't mean that that data in the cloud can't be encrypted. So oftentimes a ransomware malware will it'll be in the insured system for a while. These hackers will let it sit dormant for 3 to 6 months because their goal is that it infects everything and anything to really cripple the business. And if the ransomware encrypts data at the local hard drive level, these
Mm-hmm.
encrypted files will then get synced to the cloud and are now encrypted there as well.
Huh.
So we've also had an incident where one of our insureds didn't realize that their cloud backups actually wasn't working. And
Hmm.
so it got encrypted and then they didn't have backups. So we're advising business owners to, if you do store your data in the cloud, back up
Mhm.
that data and back them up in 2 segregated environments. So if one backup gets corrupted, you have another one.
Perfect.
But we're dealing with a full $3 million limit loss right now with one of our other insureds because the hacker actually gained admin access and went in and deleted all of the insured's backups. And so once the hacker actually triggered the ransomware, the insured was forced to pay the ransom. So basically the ransoms for small companies, they could be really large. And like we just had another maybe $3 million manufacturer and the hackers requested $300,000. So that alone is scary because a lot of businesses don't have that money on kind of a moment's notice to pay for a lot of these attacks. And then in regards to notifying us, we always advise if you have a policy, get us involved right away because there's been so many claims that we've had to have more of a reactive approach where if
Mhm.
we are involved right away, we could take that proactive approach, negotiate with the hackers, figure out if we can get your data back as cheap as possible
Mhm.
without having to rebuild all the data. Because if you wipe your systems and basically now the business is going to be suffering a ton more lost
Mhm.
profit for not being able to operate. So we always recommend to bring us in as soon as possible.
Got it. Thank you.
So the next claim I want to talk about is funds transfer fraud. As I said, you'll hear me say social engineering, wire transfer fraud, they're kind of all synonymous. So I don't want to confuse you. But we actually like calling it wire transfer fraud. It's a lot easier to remember because it has the acronym WTF, which is exactly what you are going to be thinking if you realize that your CFO accidentally wired $20,000 to a hacker's bank account. So these scams are typically involved with a criminal spoofing or mimicking a legitimate email address. So for example, an individual will receive an email that looks like it's coming from an executive of the company and that business, and it will look like a legit email. And that email will then request a payment or a wire transfer or a gift card purchase. And it
Yeah.
all seems legitimate, but it's actually
Mhm.
hackers trying to funnel money directly into their fraudulent bank accounts. So what's interesting is 2019 was the year of business emails being compromised because the number one way that hackers pull off a lot of these attacks is they will try to steal the login credentials of one of your employees' Outlook accounts. And that way they have access to monitor the correspondence, figuring out who the business operates with, who their customers or suppliers are. They're going to look at previous invoices, use that as a template, and then they're going to send an email from the actual employee's account so it all looks legitimate. Now, there's a few people that hackers are targeting here. So we typically see them targeting senior executive officers, primarily because they have the ability to request a lot of these transfers. We're also
Mm.
seeing hackers targeting employees or even the clients themselves, or even any vendors. Um, Another attack here that hackers are utilizing is called a brute force attack. So hackers can go on the dark web, they can purchase a program that is essentially a software that guesses millions of generic passwords every hour until access is granted. So if they know that individual's email address, they can then go on to Outlook Online and just keep trying to guess these passwords through that program until they gain access. So again, why is a cyber policy essential? Because obviously, if one of your employees accidentally wires $10,000 or $50,000 to a fraudulent bank account, that's going to be an initial and immediate loss on the business. If they trick one of your clients to transferring funds, now you're going to have a really angry client, and you're going to be lost. You're going to have lost profits, and a lot of the times when these targeted attacks happen, they gain access to your computer system. So you're going to want to engage a forensics investigator to make sure they're not still lurking there, and that your systems are clean. And so again, you might need to engage those professionals that charge those high hourly billables. And so what's really unique to Evolve's policy is we're going to pick up 3 separate bank accounts. We're going to pick up the insured's bank account if one of your employees accidentally sends funds to a fraudulent bank account. We're going to pick up your client's bank account. So if a hacker impersonates the business and tricks one of your clients, we will actually reimburse your client. And then we're going to also pick up the personal bank accounts for any senior executive officer. So if the hacker steals the login credentials to, say, the CEO's personal Wells Fargo, if they're doing their personal banking online and their corporate device is compromised, we'll actually reimburse that personal financial loss.
Well, I have a question. What's a good way for a business owner to assess kind of what their exposure is? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe from a funds transfer fraud level, but
yeah.
obviously this is very expensive, but if something does happen, so, how do you, is there kind of a model that you use or
Yeah,
more of a
so
baseline?
we just recommend the business to take a look at what is your average wire transfer or electronic transfer,
Okay.
and how many are you sending each month. So our base limits start at 250 grand. So if your average transfer is under 250K, that will probably be sufficient. But
Okay.
you also need to take into account that a lot of these claims, hackers will get, they'll do smaller increments, and they might do 4 $40,000 transfers, and then 2 weeks later, a month later, the business catches on. So you always have to take that into consideration. We can increase that sublimit to $500,000 or $1 million for an additional premium. But if we do increase the limits, we do need to get a better understanding of the controls that the business has in place when transferring funds.
Thanks.
No problem. So now I'm going to kind of talk about COVID and the current landscape, because even in the pandemic, I mean, I think no one could have predicted 2020 and
Right.
how it has unfolded. But in the cyber world, it has been nothing but boring. Cyber exposures have increased dramatically with
Yeah.
everyone working from home on unsecured networks. Businesses were scrambling to get their employees set up remotely, which have caused them to overlook certain security configurations. And many of the times, a lot of these employees working from home are working off their personal devices using a VPN or a remote desktop. So it's important to note that any employee working off their own personal device is now that much more at risk, because your personal computer is not going to have all the bells and whistles in terms of IT security to prevent a lot of these attacks. So cyber claims have been spiking significantly as hackers are taking advantage of the COVID-19 crisis. And so since the start of the new year, hackers have actually registered over 4,000 domains containing the phrases Corona or COVID, and these fraudulent domains are essentially being used to execute phishing and ransomware attacks designed or disguised as coronavirus-related emails. So bad actors are essentially having a field day with the population working remotely. they're leveraging COVID to trick victims into installing rogue applications or click on malicious content buried in pictures, or we've been seeing them buried in COVID maps. So behind the scenes, a lot of this malicious code is aimed to steal credentials off victims' machines. And the majority of antivirus or firewall may stop this, but again, if you are on your own personal laptop, you might not have a lot of these preventative actions to prevent some of these attacks. So a nice note is that not every cyber policy actually picks up or extends coverage to personal devices. But a nice thing is Evolve's policy actually does cover remote employees on all devices, including personal computers and phones.
It's really important now.
So we're also seeing a ton of hackers posing as government agencies. They are posing as the CDC, the World Health Organization, especially in in April and in March, when people were eager to get information on how long the stay-at-home ordinance is going to last, when they're going to be receiving the stimulus, what are the updates on unemployment. People are anxious for information. And all these hackers are essentially posing as a lot of government agencies pretending to have that information. And if you're an employee working from home, if you have small kids running around, you're going to be distracted and you want to be in the know. So you're going to be a little bit more, you might fall more victim to a lot of these attacks. So what's interesting is we've seen a massive spike in claims for this remote desktops. So if any of you on the call do have employees working from home on their personal devices, utilizing a remote desktop or a VPN, you just be wary. With a lot of these remote desktops, we've seen businesses, they set these up with only needing a username and password. So hackers are essentially going to utilize that brute force attack. And it will essentially just guess millions of passwords until they get logged in. Hackers actually, they sell which IP addresses for remote desktops are vulnerable on the dark web, but so it's just something to really note. What's also been interesting is since March, we've seen over 148 million attacks on remote desktops alone, and around 32 million of those were here in the US. So just something to note, if you do utilize remote desktops, make sure you're utilizing a VPN on an encrypted server, and you have some more securities in place than just the username and password. So now I'm going to talk about some good cyber hygiene, because we know budgets are tough with COVID. So businesses are closely watching their expenses, and they might not have the means to invest in a cyber policy at this time. So throughout the past few months, we provided a ton of information to essentially help you understand your exposure and reduce your actual risk. So one of the things that you can do is check if you've been breached. There's a website called Have I Been Pwned? We can send you guys the link following the meeting, but they are essentially an aggregator. And if you search your email address in their website, it will show you every single third party who has compromised your data. The next is setting up multi-factor authentication. So this is essentially a dual authenticator. So if you're logging into, say, your email account from an unknown computer, you'll get a push notification on your phone, just verifying that this is you. These things are free, really easy to set up. It's really only annoying if you're logging on to an unknown computer, but these are one of the biggest ways that you can prevent those wire transfer fraud losses, because the majority of the time it's emails being compromised. And if a hacker sees that they need a MFA or multi-factor authentication to log into your email account, they're going to go on to the next victim because they're going to be an easier target. We also recommend using a password manager. There's apps like LastPass that will essentially store all of your passwords in an encrypted file, and it will change them every 30 days. So one of the neat things of Evolve is we've actually partnered with Have I Been Pwned, and we are able to run any business's website domain on the dark web. And we can actually show you which employees at your company have had their data compromised, and that's currently floating around the dark web. So if you think about every day, people are going online, they're creating accounts for work, banking, social media, entertainment, shopping. Most people don't realize that hackers are attacking these third parties all the time to steal credentials. So like LinkedIn, for example, they suffered a data breach in 2016. Hackers stole the email addresses and passwords. And so if you use the same password to log into your Outlook that you do your LinkedIn, hackers could get into your account right now. And so just like I said, we can run one of these scans, but if your information is floating out there on the dark web, you are that much more likely to be targeted to a lot of these phishing attacks. Now, I actually took the liberty of running Tony's email address on Have I Been Pwned. So if you get one of our reports, you can utilize Have I Been Pwned, and this is essentially what the report looks like. It will break down each breach, so it'll give you a little synopsis. It will show you which data was compromised in each breach, so it kind of gives you some information on how to react. So if you do see maybe your passwords were compromised, it should give you, you should maybe look to changing and updating those passwords.
So I got 13 breaches, right? I think I was the most out of my entire office. So. Again, I'm number one, not in a good way, so.
Right. So a next thing is just make sure you're updating all your software. This will really help prevent hackers from infiltrating through those vulnerabilities, because companies realize when they have holes and they'll always try to patch that. So making sure you always have the most up-to-date software is going to be key for IT security. Making sure you're blocking pop-up ads. A lot of malicious code is hidden in adware. So making sure that you don't get that pop-up ad that comes when you accidentally click on a link or a picture or something on a website will help prevent you from getting hit with a hacking attack. And third, we recommend investing in DNS filtering. It essentially will block any malicious websites if a user tries to click on it. So it almost acts as like that one final safety net if you're clicking on things online. Also, we recommend engaging in some phishing awareness training. I think making it aware to your employees that this is a thing and this is how a lot of hackers breach businesses is going to help stop a lot of these attacks. So really education is going to be key here. We also recommend you guys encrypting all of your data in transit and at rest, and then enabling software to identifying incoming and outgoing threats. And then finally, making sure you're backing up your backups. We kind of touched upon backing up your cloud, but even having an offline backup. So if your systems do get hit with a ransomware attack, you know you have this offline backup that is not connected to the internet, so there's no way that it could have been compromised. And then the final thing is to get a comprehensive cyber policy. This will provide a more proactive and reactive response. Many cyber policies in the marketplace come with free risk management services, employee-based training, vulnerability assessments. And so, like I said in the beginning, investing in all these technological defenses is great, but human error is consistently the #1 cause of our claims. And so having that cyber policy is actually going to really round out your risk management profile and making sure that you guys aren't going to get hit with a lot of these costs.
Well, in general, I mean, we've worked with you for some time and we recommend you because you guys have the most comprehensive in regards to policies than most.
Right.
How expensive is a typical cyber policy?
Yeah, it's really cheap, Tony. So cyber is in what's called a really soft market at the moment.
Okay.
There's a lot of capacity in the marketplace, so there's a lot of insurance carriers, and not every business understands their exposure. So some players have not bought a cyber policy yet. So it has basically created this scenario where coverage is extremely broad, pricing is extremely cheap. For say a contractor under 5 million revenue, they could be paying less than $2,000 or $1,500 for a full-blown, extremely comprehensive $1 million limit, and will provide adequate protection. So it is really, really cheap right now, which is interesting. So I just kind of going to, I know we only have 8 minutes left, so I kind of want to get to some of the claims examples, but for those of you on the call, I wanted to just let you know that since cyber is all we do, we provide a ton of coverage comparisons. So if you guys are ever curious on how Evolve's coverage stacks up to any of our competitors, or if you have a current cyber policy, we can provide a free audit to show you guys how the coverage stacks up. And then also, if anyone purchases an Evolve policy, we offer 5 free risk management services that I mentioned. One is actually an intentional phishing tool, so management can send fake phishing emails out to employees, figuring out what employees are more prone to clicking on certain links. And if an employee clicks on that link, they'll be prompted on a series of videos to train. We also have a vulnerability assessment. We have Control Case, which is a free 30-minute consultation for any compliance issues. So if it's HIPAA or CCPA, they can help you guys out. Now, one of the largest benefits, like I mentioned, is having a claims team that comes with this cyber policy. So if you get hit with a ransomware attack tomorrow, do you have a plan in place to rectify the situation? Now, I mentioned that we have 90 in-house professionals to assist you the moment you have an incident. Now, this is key because in a cyber claim, time is money. You have that 48-hour window to pay the ransom or potentially recover a lost funds transfer. So at a $0 deductible, any policyholder will have the ability to call our 24/7 breach response hotline, and they will be connected to one of our in-house forensics experts immediately. So unfortunately, without a cyber policy, these 48-hour windows are often missed, and that business is then going to need to pay around $500 an hour to engage a forensics investigator. What's unique to Evolve is we have a team of tech-savvy incident response professionals, including in-house forensics, ethical hackers, attorneys, previous law enforcement, who all help reduce and mitigate the cyber event damage that the business suffers. So since we handle this all in-house, we're able to dramatically reduce the cost of the claims, meaning claims are going to get handled quicker, and there's going to be far less reputational harm or lost profit. So I think we have maybe time for one claims example. Tony, would you like me to give a ransomware claims example or a wire transfer fraud claims example?
It just seems like ransomware is, I see both. It's
Right.
been like 50-50. So I guess maybe pick one that you think would be, you obviously saw who's RSVP'd for this event. So which one do you think would be more specific to them based on their industry?
I think they're all going to be relatively applicable to all industries. I know with the ransomware attack, we had essentially a distributor, and distributors, contractors, and wholesalers and manufacturers, they've all been slower to purchase cyber policies because they don't obviously hold a large amount of sensitive data. And what they didn't realize is how exposed they were to cyber risk when they don't have access to their computer systems. And most modern organizations will utilize computers to run their normal business functions. And so one of our policyholders was a $50 million distributor of food products throughout the West Coast. They had a few warehouses that they were responsible for delivering products to and from, and then also delivering products directly to their clients. So the incident began when an employee fell for a phishing email. The email was spoofed to look like it was coming from the CEO, stating that there was a financial statement that needed to be verified. So the employee was curious, clicked on that attachment, and immediately a ransomware variant was then downloaded onto the business's server and began encrypting the files and programs across the network, including the insured's backups. So as I mentioned, typically the hackers will let the virus sit dormant. And so once the hacker triggered this virus, around 800 of their computers and 75 of their servers were infected with ransomware. And Now, this scenario was interesting because with all their data and backups and some of their hardware fully corrupted, the insured was either faced to pay the ransom, which I think was around 10 Bitcoins or $100,000, or wipe their computer system and rebuild everything. Now, this was a scenario where the insured turned to their internal IT team, who made a knee-jerk reaction to wipe all of their systems and rebuild their data because they didn't want to pay the 100K, thinking that that was going to be a cheaper option. We were then brought in and we were notified of late. So now we are coming in and kind of cleaning up the mess. And so since they decided to do that, we were stuck with having to rebuild everything from scratch. And so we essentially had to pay the employees to call their clients, rekey their information. We had to basically rebuild all of their logistics software. They had to go and they had to take inventory in all of their warehouses from scratch, which all took time. And they had to call their clients, key all their delivery schedules, addresses, all that general information back into their database. And this took around 4 to 5 weeks. And so this was, like I said, a $50 million entity not able to operate for almost a month. That's going to be a lot of costs that are going to accrue. So we ended up paying around $300,000 in the cost to recreate their systems, and then we paid almost $1 million on just their lost profits alone. So a good cyber policy is going to have hardware replacement costs. It's going to have really broad business interruption costs, and so always look for those when you're reviewing a cyber policy. But yeah, I think the takeaway here is if they utilized our team and notified us, we could have probably paid that. We could have gotten that 100K extortion demand down, and this could have been a much cheaper fix for the business.
Awesome. Thank you, Bo. You know, thank you all that came and joined us today. I know you're very busy. You probably have RSVP'd for 10 other webinars today. You know, for those that have joined us today, Bo, maybe you can tell them what we're offering them for participating as well, too.
Yes, of course. So following this meeting, Tony and Brad will be in touch with you guys. I will provide, we have a few PDFs on just free, some are free, some are easy steps that you guys can take as business owners to enhance your security during this critical time. And so it will have links for you to look into all of those. We can run a scan of the dark web of your guys' domain, so you guys can assess if any of your employees as well have been compromised in those third-party data breaches, just to give you guys a little bit more information or insight onto your own exposure.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Bo, you did a great job. We have absolutely no questions because you've scared us all. We're all going to go back to paper and pencil. Thank you so much for giving us a download of what's out there. You know, I think the visuals on the almost the pyramid scheme in ransomware, and it's out there. And I think all of us, as we're working from home, remote and everything, we're just going to have more exposure. I myself put in LastPass, also to training not only myself but also my team, because like I said, I'm seeing, you know, more and more of these interesting looking emails. And then also to know that if there's a policy, we can also too make sure that we go to you immediately for assistance as well too. So Bo, thank you so much. I look forward to reaching out to all of you to give you some of those goodies that Bo talked about, and hopefully you will never have to use your cyber policy, but we want to make sure you have the right coverage. Also too, would love to invite you all here for our upcoming webinar. It's on protected leaves. It is so confusing right now in regards to protected leaves. And so we want to bring in Paul Fleck again to talk about paid leaves, protected leaves, ADA, as we're talking about our famous topic, COVID-19. So Bo, thank you so much for your informative, also to somewhat scary presentation. but I think all of us feel a little bit more, I would say, equipped to make sure what we have in place is what we need. For all of you that are looking for best practices as well too, we'll be giving you that information out as well. For those of you that like a recording of this, please let me know, and we will get in touch with all of you that were on the webinar today. So Bo, thank you so much. We will try to make sure we don't click on any sort of suspicious type of emails. Thank you for your time today. For all of you, my clients out there, contacts and friends, we will be in contact with you as well too. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you on September 24th. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you guys for joining. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.